Testing.
Directly into the microphone, just a few inches away. And if you turn your head to sort of make a point.
Test one, two.
All right. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the December 5th Planning Commission meeting. Happy to be here in person. Before we get started, I'm going to read a quick note on how we are going to take public comment this evening. There is a dial-in option for making public comments at tonight's Planning Commission meeting. The phone number is 650-898-6965. Once dialed in, enter conference ID 383-609-442, and then press the pound key. Once the chair, myself, has announced the public comment opportunity for the item on which you wish to comment, press star 5 to raise your hand. City staff will then identify you by the last 4 digits of your phone number when it is your turn to speak. Once you are called on to speak, press star 6 to unmute yourself. Wait a few seconds and then begin speaking. Be sure to mute any other broadcasts you may be watching, such as Channel 26 or live stream coverage of the meeting. All right, with that said, can we please have a roll call?
Chair Berman.
Present.
Commissioner Domerat.
Present.
Commissioner Ferguson.
Present.
Commissioner Godwin.
Present.
Vice Chair Hauser.
Present. And now we'll do a salute to the flag. I will go ahead and lead it. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And before we get started with our administrative business tonight, I'll ask if there's any public comment on the administrative business. And if you're dialing in by phone, please press star 5 to raise your hand. I'll go ahead and read the call-in number in case you're watching on Channel 26 and would like to call in to raise your hand. 650-898-6965. Conference ID is 383-609-442, and then press the pound key. Do we have any call-in? Oh.
We do not have any call-ins.
All right. Then I will close that public comment opportunity and move on to the approval of order of agenda. Vice Chair Hauser.
Thank you, Chair. I was wondering actually if we would consider moving item 4 right after the consent items. This is the one about consideration of receiving public input, and then in consideration of the public, I thought it might be nice to put that at the front so that they don't have to sit through the 3 other items.
Thank you for that motion. Is there a second? Commissioner Domerat.
I'll second the motion to move the... I'll second the motion.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second on the change of the order of agenda, bringing item number 4 to the top of the consideration items list. Can we have a push button vote?
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. On to approval of minutes. So we have meeting minutes from August 15th, September 19th, and October 5th, all 2022. Is there a motion to approve or any comments on the meeting minutes? And I think these could be taken individually or all together. Vice Chair Hauser.
I just wanted to ask staff for the minutes on September 19th. It has me listed as absent, but I was there, and then it has me arriving at 7:02. So I just wanted to clarify was it just that I was not there when you took roll call?
That may be the reason. I can double check to make sure that it's clearly
Okay.
reflected in the minutes.
Well, then I will move to approve all 3 meeting minutes with the clarification that I was present on September 19th.
Thank you, Vice Chair Hauser. Is there a second? Commissioner Godwin.
I will second that motion.
We have a motion and a second to approve all 3 meeting minutes. Can we have a push button vote?
And that motion passes unanimously.
All right, on to designation of liaison. It looks like we have none. And now on to oral communications. This portion of the agenda is available to the public to address the Planning Commission on any issue within the subject matter jurisdiction of the commission that is not on the agenda. The time allowed for any speaker will be 3 minutes. And please reference the screen for call-in, for those who are calling in and would like to raise their hand.
Callers.
All right, thank you. I'll close oral communications and on to consent items. So first consent item is file number 2022-031, Emergency Coastal Development Permit, CDP 44622, filed by applicant City of Pacifica for demolition of portions of a failing shotcrete soil nail wall on the bluff face along 330 Esplanade Avenue. Assessor parcel number 009-413-030. Recommended CEQA action is not applicable, and recommended action is receive and file. Can we please have a staff report?
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, Commissioners. I'm Planning Director Christian Murdoch. This is a brief item. It's an informational report only for the Commission. There's no real action required. However, the municipal code does require that we report out on the Planning Director's issuance of emergency coastal development permits. In this particular instance, the condition of the crumbling shotcrete wall on the bluff presented a threat to public health and safety in my assessment, and therefore it was inappropriate to delay issuance of a coastal development permit until the regular CDP process could play out, which often takes several months. And so in the interest of preserving public health and safety and the potential risk to those presented by the ongoing condition of the wall, I felt it was appropriate to issue this emergency coastal development permit. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Murdoch. Can you remind me, we will take public comment on this agenda item, correct?
That's correct. All items on the agenda need public comment. The consent calendar is a part of the agenda we don't use often. Typically, there's not a staff report unless there's a particular request from a commissioner. Often there are more items on a typical consent calendar, so the public comment could be taken on all of them collectively unless an item's pulled. So in this instance, a single public comment period would be.
Okay, thank you. I'm wondering if the commission would be amenable to opening public comment before our commission questions? All right, sounds like we're all okay with that. So I'll open up public comment. And for this agenda item, so I am opening the public comment period of this agenda item. For those who are dialed in by phone and wish to make public comments, or I guess a singular comment, sorry, press *5 to raise your hand. City staff will then identify you by the last 4 digits of your phone number when it is your turn to speak. Once you are called on to speak, press *6 to unmute yourself. Wait a few seconds and then begin speaking. Be sure to mute any other broadcast you may be watching, such as the Channel 26 or live stream coverage of the meeting.
Chair, we have no callers.
Thank you. Then I'll close public comment and bring it back to the commission for questions. Vice Chair Hauser.
Unless somebody wants to pull this item, I motion that we approve the consent calendar.
All right, looks like we have another commissioner's hand up, but we'll pin that. Commissioner Domerat.
I guess in looking at whatever staff report we had, there was a comment that the city was negotiating the purchase of that property. Is that city property right now?
That's a question that's difficult for me to answer, Commissioner Domerat. The exact status is not known to me. The city attorney's office has been leading the.
So if it was not city property and still private property, wouldn't the private property owner be responsible to remove that?
So my understanding is the city has legal control and thus the responsibility to undertake the demolition of the property. The particular nuances of the sequence of steps involved in an eminent domain proceeding, I don't have all of the details, but we did confirm that the city had appropriate control and interest in the property to undertake the permit and the subsequent demolition.
Great, thank you.
I have a couple questions. I know that we've received a similar consideration item in the past for an emergency CDP to demolish some infrastructure in this area. Are there any other foreseen, I guess, lots that have similar concrete, shotcrete walls or perhaps structures that will need soon demolition that we could pursue proactively?
I'm not able to say for certain whether they're shotcrete walls. However, up and down the coastline, due to the progressive bluff erosion that varies from year to year, there are developments in various states of disrepair, and it is something that we're mindful of. The tools the city has available to address them require particular interventions. There's not any silver bullet to address these, and often the property owners are disinterested in their degraded property, and so it's a challenge for the city to tackle these proactively, and often we find out and end up taking action later than would be optimal to demolish the development.
Okay. I was just curious because I know that every once in a while we receive a similar consent item. My other question, and this may be up to the demolition contractor, or maybe it's not thought out just yet, or was this site already demolished?
So this 330 Esplanade Avenue site was one of three in that 300 block, 310, 320, and 330, that the city intervened and required demolition of or demolished itself back in, I believe, 2015 or 16, after some severe winter storms. The buildings were deemed uninhabitable, and the city went through the process to require or to demolish the buildings.
I guess the shotcrete wall, has that already been demolished, or is that scheduled?
So the demolition referenced in this permit, to my knowledge, has not been completed yet.
Then my question is there plans to, during demolition work, to block off the public beach below just for safety reasons?
So I don't have the details of that, and that beach closure is outside of the city's permitting jurisdiction. And so if known and necessary as part of the demolition process, the city would need to contact the Coastal Commission. The Public Works Department will need to raise that issue with the Planning Department, and we can assist with that application as necessary.
Okay. Yeah, it's just a thought that I wanted to kind of put on the record, just in case, for example, anything's dropped during demolition. I'd hate for anyone to get injured. That's all the questions that I have then. And I know, I'm sorry, Commissioner Godwin?
Yeah, I just had one. There's the Coastal Commission maintains a ramp and stairs right adjacent to that property. Has there been any effort to let them know that you guys are going to be doing this roughly when the schedule is, and they may want for safety reasons to close that that access ramp and stairs for to make it a little easier to do the work.
Sure. So I believe you're referring to the Land's End public access point. That's actually privately owned and maintained. It's a condition of the associated Ocean Air Apartments development project. In the past, when the city was undertaking demolition of the entire apartment buildings, we did obtain Coastal Commission permission to close that segment of the beach. However, in this instance, we don't have sufficient details to pursue such a closure at this point in time because we don't know the exact scheduling of the demolition work.
Understand?
Are there any other questions? I believe Vice Chair Hauser put a motion on the floor to approve this consent item. Is there a second? Commissioner Ferguson.
I'll second Hauser's proposal.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote.
That motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. On to consideration items, and we are going to move to agenda item number 4. So this is consideration of a future agenda item to receive public input on the Planning Commission's performance. Recommended CEQA action is not a project. And recommended action is approve the annual report and discuss the presentation to City Council, including identification of a commission representative or representatives. Christian, do you happen to have a staff report to present for this item, or?
Just a verbal presentation,
Okay.
essentially regurgitating what's in the written record
Sure.
for anybody that's listening. And so I'll just go through that for a few moments if you're ready, Chair Berman.
I am ready.
Good evening, Commissioners. Again, Planning Director Christian Murdoch. The Planning Commission has considered a number of important items in 2022, including but not limited to the 2040 General Plan Update and Sharp Park Specific Plan. At the Planning Commission meeting on September 19th, 2022, Commissioner Domerat requested consideration of an opportunity for public input on the Planning Commission's performance. Opportunities for public input on the Planning Commission's performance already exist. Each Planning Commission meeting includes a public comment opportunity on items not on the agenda during the oral communications portion of the meeting, which could include public remarks on the Planning Commission's performance. Similarly, the public can submit written comments on the Planning Commission's performance at any time in writing at publiccomment@pacifica.gov or at the city's offices at 540 Crespi Drive. Another public input opportunity to comment on the Planning Commission's performance is the annual report process to City Council. The City Council resolution establishing annual reporting for commissions and committees provides that they shall submit annual reports, and the reports shall be presented to the City Council at one dedicated meeting on a determined by the Council each year. As described in the Pacifica City Council Subcommittee Report on Committees and Commissions, the annual report should be a summary of the commission's or committee's work for the year and provide an opportunity for council questions and feedback on their activities. Past practice to prepare the Planning Commission's annual report includes at least one Planning Commission meeting to discuss the contents of the report, followed by presentation of the report itself to the City Council. Both steps in the annual report process provide public input and comment opportunities at the respective meetings. Additionally, state law requires the city to submit annual reports by April 1st of each year on the status and progress of implementation of the general plan during the prior calendar year to the City Council, the Governor's Office of Planning and Research, and the California Department of Housing and Community Development. Pacifica Municipal Code also establishes the purpose of the Planning Commission, which includes, in part, recommending and advising the City Council on preparation, adoption, and amendment of the general plan based on the geographic, social, economic, and environmental characteristics of Pacifica. Thus, to the extent the Planning Commission has a role in activities related to the general plan, its performance is also relevant to the annual report on implementation of the general plan made to the City Council. State law requires that a public comment opportunity be provided as part of this annual report. Staff has identified several opportunities for the public to provide input on the Planning Commission's performance that already exist. The Planning Commission will need to determine whether the creation of an additional public input opportunity for this purpose warrants further consideration as a future agenda item. And it sounds like there may have been a technical issue with the agenda, but our recommended action is to provide direction to staff whether regarding placement of an item to receive public input on the Planning Commission's performance on a future agenda item.
Thank you for that clarification, Mr. Murdoch. I'm wondering if members of the commission would be amenable to receiving public comment before discussing as a commission? All right. Seeing all the head nods, I will open public comment for this agenda item, and I'll just remind everyone that for those who are dialed in by phone and wish to make public comment, please press *5 to raise your hand. City staff will then identify you by the last 4 digits of your phone number when it is your turn to speak. Once you are called on to speak, press *6 to unmute yourself. Wait a few seconds and then begin speaking. Be sure to mute any other broadcast you may be watching, such as Channel 26 or live stream coverage of the meeting.
Chair Berman, while we're waiting to see if any dial-in commenters are present, I did want to note that the commission received one written public comment in advance of tonight's meeting, which was provided by email to the commissioners. It's also available on the city's website and in the rear of the council chambers.
Thank you, Planning Director Murdoch.
We have no callers.
All right, thank you. I will close the public comment period on this agenda item then and bring it back to the commission. Commissioner Domerat.
The concept for this goes a little bit further than just, in my mind, and why I proposed it, would go a little bit further than just having the public evaluate the performance and the performance reports. It was really to give the public the opportunity to exchange ideas of how things can be improved for the future. Maybe even potential policy changes of how the Planning Commission may or may not do things. So the public doesn't really get an opportunity to really interact a little bit informally with the Planning Commissioner. So it was more of a setup of an informal meeting, kind of a brainstorming session, saying, okay, we have all these, here was our performance, we did 25 permits, we approved 30, you know, all of that is one thing, but would the public want to make comments or suggestions of how we can do things better? That was kind of the concept. I don't see that coming out through here. I'm only seeing the performance review, that they already could see the performance review, but there's no place to take it that next step.
Thank you, Commissioner Domerat, for clarification on your original request. Vice Chair Hauser.
I actually completely agree with Commissioner Domerat, and I was wondering if there was maybe, and this is for you, Mr. Murdoch, a question, if we formatted this as like a study session or a community meeting that maybe took place, would there be an opportunity for more of a conversation? Obviously, we wouldn't, I think the thing that's hard is like, how do you talk about items when it's not known what's going to be discussed because it's not agendized and made public? So I understand that there's some technical challenges logistically, but I do really agree with this idea that there needs to be more of an opportunity for not just us re-asking questions that we get from people, but actually having the conversation.
Sure. So certainly, Vice Chair Hauser, the study session format sounds like it could be a reasonable fit for some sort of more informal, relaxed dialogue, if you will, between commission and the community. As you mentioned, there would need to be some criteria ostensibly to inform the public as to the nature of the discussion. So if that's the direction the commission goes in tonight, we would want to get some meat on the bone, so to speak, as to what topics would be covered so that the public can be aware and meaningfully participate in such an item. I probably have some other thoughts I'll want to offer after I understand more of the totality of the commission's discussion on this matter, but I think the study session format probably would be appropriate.
I agree with a combination. I think they're both in line. Commissioner Domerat and Vice Chair Hauser's comments. After reading the staff report, I tend to agree with staff that there are a lot of opportunities for public comment during each of our meetings, and also receiving public comment via email. However, I think what we are lacking are those informal study sessions and really an opportunity for the Planning Commission to interact with the public and have a discussion on how we can work collaboratively, especially on big items like the housing element. Commissioner Godwin.
I know one thing that would help me, and I'm not sure whether it interests anyone else on the commission, would be more polling of the public. I know there were some things that came up last year that seemed to generate a lot of comment in town and a lot of emotion about whether we supported them or failed to support them. So if we use, at least it would seem to me, some sense of polling people who wanted to participate could register their opinion on a limited range of options. We could get information pretty quickly, and it would provide us a sense of direction in the community.
Thank you, Commissioner Godwin. And I believe the city now has a fast poll that's somewhat randomized for the community. Perhaps there's an opportunity to use that new device.
That's right, Chair Berman. The tool is called Flash Vote. It requires folks to register in advance, which has been criticized fairly by some people. We have tried multiple times to push out community awareness to increase the number of registered participants. So folks can go to the city's website and register for the Flash Vote to be one of the survey recipients. Among the registered users, a statistically randomized sample is selected, so not everyone gets to respond to every survey, but that helps improve the validity of the results. And then you can ask, typically, I think up to 5 questions. It fits in that model. And the vendor of the Flash Vote system says, results in relatively high response rates, which we've seen in the Flash Votes that we've sent out. They typically are open, I think, for up to 5 days, something along those lines, not an extended period, because as the charts show, the response rates tend to drop off precipitatively after the first 24 hours, thereabouts. So it is one of the tools. We would need to get questions that I think could be structured into that, like yes, no, or multiple choice kind of field, even though there is an opportunity for free form input as well. It's just much harder to process and digest in any sort of quantifiable manner.
Thank you, Director Murdoch. Any other comments, questions? Mr. Murdoch, do you feel that you have at least somewhat clear direction right now, or is there any other topic that you'd like us to discuss on this matter?
Sure. So I think I do need a fair amount of additional direction as to the content to be discussed. It seems like with Commissioner Domerat's prior mention, I understood it to be the commission's performance, and he may have been envisioning more of the operations of the commission, which are 2 different things. And so I apologize if I missed that sentiment in the prior mention of this item. I do want the commission to be thoughtful about providing a public input opportunity and trying to square that with things the commission can actually provide to the community so that there's not a unmet expectation on the part of those that might participate. The Planning Commission is one of those city bodies that has a relatively narrow purview, right? It has an obligation to advise on the general plan, to review and take action on development projects, and other activities as assigned by the City Council. It doesn't have a broad remit to go and investigate topics and change city processes on its own. And so whatever input the commission might be seeking, it may not be within its power to actually implement. And so it may be something to take note of and to try to incorporate in the Planning Commission's next annual report to the City Council, so that perhaps if there's some City Council action by resolution or ordinance to redirect the Planning Commission, that could be put in place. I'm just not sure that the commission can do much to change its operations on its own, although the information might be helpful, again, to do the additional work of engaging the City Council and pushing for whatever other changes the law might allow.
Thank you. Vice Chair, or how about we hear from Commissioner Ferguson?
Oh, I think Mr. Murdoch answered most of my questions, was just kind of what true actionable items could we get out of a meeting like this. But if it's just to gauge the test the waters and see how the community is feeling. I'm all for having a study session. I look at a lot of empty rooms for all of our meetings, so I'm not sure we're going to get a different response for that, but I'm open to whatever it is you guys are looking for.
Thank you. Vice Chair Hauser?
I was going to ask, I know Mr. Murdoch had mentioned that he had a lot of opinions, and I think we've heard some of them, so I was going to ask if there were any others that we should hear, but I did want to also respond to what you just said. And I mean, I don't know how the rest of the commission feels, but I think what could be really helpful is as part of this, I'm going to call it study session, even though I don't know if we're doing that yet. But as part of this study session, maybe staff could make some sort of brief presentation about what the role of the Planning Commission actually is. I know, I see a lot of comments about how people feel on, Nextdoor, for example, and some of them are like, I don't understand why the Planning Commission is even listening to this. And I think sometimes, like, for example, people don't understand that we have a statutory obligation to hear any application that's provided. So, like, information like that, or information about where we can effectuate change and where we can't, I mean, I think that would be helpful to people who don't know it, and a helpful reminder to people who maybe do. I don't know how people feel about that.
I agree with that. I'm kind of visualizing almost like a town hall, similar to the town hall / study sessions that we have for the housing element, or what we had for the general plan in the past. Commissioner Domerat?
Yeah, I would concur with that. And many of my travels around the city, a lot of people don't really know, what the Planning Commission's purpose is or what they do. So the start to that kind of study session or town hall meeting would be to make them a little bit more aware of what the role is. At that point, ideas and concepts that may or may not come out of that can then be polled. I mean, then people can then vote to see, well, what out of all those ideas that we generate would be a priority for them to see get done. With that understanding that probably all of those ideas would have to go to the city council for consideration and approval if it required some change to how the commission would have to do what it does. So, but no, that I think that's a great idea to give the public an opportunity to kind of, again, without having to go. I mean, you can go online and you can read all that, but that's a good start to that type of meeting.
Commissioner Ferguson?
Yeah, I think this is something that the Planning Commission definitely doesn't have the authority to do anything about, but something I'd love to discuss in a forum like this is that I haven't found a readily digestible portal for information of what's coming down the pipeline, what ongoing projects we have, whether it's the local coastal plan or, an addition that requires a variance. I find that it takes a lot of legwork for me to find out what's going on, and things that people bring up to me in the streets, I had no idea about that. But if there was some digestible, easy to access portal, like a little bit of planning department, planning commission PR for people to go and just see what the status of things is before we get irate emails or people think that something's being looked at one way when it's just not. That's one area I could see the need for improvement.
Any other comments? I'm wondering, especially given the report that was presented to us, we're kind of reformatting that. I'm wondering if perhaps we want to, before activating this study session or town hall, perhaps we want to bring this agenda item back to the commission again, and we could solidify a more concrete approach. Vice Chair Hauser.
I concur with that. I think timing is something that I want to be cognizant of. I think it would be a huge boon to the commission if we had this town hall prior to our report out to council, and I think it's April. Is that correct, Mr. Murdoch? Is that when we typically do?
I don't know if the date's been set for this year, but it commonly occurs in that part of the year.
And then I also want to be sensitive to Commissioner Domerat, seeing that this is your item, and I just it's our, but it was your idea, so I also,
No, I think I would agree with maybe we bring it back to the commission once we have planning staff formulate maybe an outline of what it may look like.
Yeah.
In other words, we put in up front a little, who are the commissioners, or what do they do, what can they do, what can't they do right now, as a startup, and then, the discussion exchange portion, and then maybe the polling portion at the end, or whatever. So with give staff a chance to kind of formulate what this study session may look like. The timing is going to be critical. I agree. So whatever then results we can then pass on to the city council that would be beneficial.
Just a reminder to speak into the mic.
Oh.
Do you mind, I don't know if it was, if people calling in
Right.
heard. Do you
My
mind
apologies.
summarizing what you just said again? Sorry.
Yes, I agree.
Thank
with
you.
what she said.
All right. Does that sound good?
Yes, thank you, Chair Berman. I think with the feedback presented and the opportunity to come back and allow the commission to further refine that, now that I have a better understanding of the intent of the item, I think I have enough to work with for now, and we'll carry on the conversation. As far as scheduling, I will do my best to be supportive of the desire for this to come back before the required annual report process, but we are exceedingly busy right now with the housing element update, training new staff, catching up on project processing that slowed down due to our staffing shortages for the past several months. And so we have a lot on the planning department plate currently. And so we will bring this back as timely as we possibly can, but I'm not able to commit to a particular timeline right now.
I think we understand. Thank you. All right, then I will go ahead and close agenda item number 4, and we will move on to agenda item number 2, which is file number 2015-002, applicant request for extension of expiration date for site development permit PSD 801-15, use permit UP 66-15, subdivision SUB 227-15, and heritage tree removal authorization to construct 7 townhomes at 1335 Adobe Drive, assessor parcel number 023-222-080. Recommended CEQA action, exempt pursuant to CEQA guidelines section 15061B3. Recommended action, extend site development permit PSD 801-15, use permit UP 66-15, subdivision SUB 227-15, and heritage tree removal authorization for 18 months. Can we have a staff report, please?
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, Commissioners. Planning Director Christian Murdoch. As mentioned in the introduction, this is a project that the Planning Commission previously approved for a 7-unit townhome project. Since the approval, projects in general take a long time, but this project, shortly after its approval, we entered into the COVID era, which presented a lot of complications for projects. And there was also a change in property ownership and other factors that have caused the applicant to need some additional time beyond the initial approvals and another extension provided by state law. And so staff recommends that the Planning Commission grant the requested extension. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Murdoch. And I'm wondering if the applicant is present for this?
I do not see the applicant present.
Okay. Perhaps the applicant called in?
There are no callers at this moment.
Okay, thank you. Then if the commission is amenable, or perhaps we have commission questions? All right, Vice Chair Hauser.
One quick question, Mr. Murdoch. Seeing that this was a 2019 approval, if we wanted to extend, and again, obviously we haven't had public comment yet, but if we wanted to extend the entitlement with the condition that the project comply with the current heritage tree ordinance, would that be a possibility legally?
It would not be tonight. To impose any new condition of approval requires the commission to conduct a public hearing first. With respect to your specific question, I don't think it would be possible, given that state law provides that the project be subject to those local regulations in effect when project, the tentative subdivision map was deemed complete. So we would need to further research if there was any opportunity to do that. My sense is that it would be challenging, if not impossible, to change the standards applicable to the project.
Commissioner, did you have anything else, Vice Chair Hauser?
No, thank you.
Commissioner Godwin.
Yeah, one of the things I've noted is that interest rates have gone up dramatically, making these kind of projects a lot less financially feasible. Has anyone talked to the applicant from the city saying they're still really ready to proceed with this, and they're still in a financial state where this is attractive to them? Or is that a question we're not allowed to ask?
There's no information that I have, Commissioner Godwin, about the financial circumstances of this particular developer. What I can tell you is the architects representing the project have been very eager to get this extension finalized by the city. They very much want to continue processing the building permit application according to their representations to me. And they just need to bring in, as I understand it, some additional technical expertise on the project team. And they didn't want to spend the money to do that until they had certainty with respect to this extension. So all indications on my end are that the applicant intends to continue with the project and to construct it.
Thank you.
Commissioner Ferguson?
Withdraw my comment.
All right. Not seeing any other lights, I will go ahead and open public comment for this agenda item. For those who are dialed in by phone and wish to make public comment, sorry, there's an A missing, make a public comment, press *5 to raise your hand. City staff will then identify you by the last 4 digits of your phone number when it is your turn to speak. Once you are called on to speak, press *6 to unmute yourself, wait a few seconds, and then begin speaking. Be sure to mute any other broadcasts you may be watching, such as Channel 26 or live stream coverage of the meeting.
Chair, we have no callers.
All right, thank you. I will close public comment and bring it back to the commission for deliberation or a motion. Vice Chair Hauser.
My feeling, based on attachment F, is that the applicant is actively pursuing the subdivision, and I would be willing to make a motion to grant the extension. And I'll reserve my sadness that we can't apply the new Heritage Tree Ordinance, but it's not going to stop me from making the motion.
Mr. Murdoch, do you need Vice Chair Hauser to read the motion?
Probably helpful.
No, it's a simple
Okay.
motion in this instance
Okay.
to grant the extension that's been requested.
Great. So we have a motion. Is there a second? Commissioner Ferguson.
Yeah, I would second the motion.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote.
That motion passes unanimously.
All right, and now on to our last agenda item, item number 3, file number 2018-046, applicant request for extension of expiration date for the site development permit PSD 835-18, coastal development permit CDP 400-18, use permit UP 110-18, and subdivision SUB 240-18 to construct a 2-unit residential condominium duplex at 2105 Beach Boulevard, assessor parcel number 016-182-010. Recommended CEQA action is exempt pursuant to CEQA guidelines section 15061B3. Recommended action is extend site development permit PSD 835-18, coastal development permit CDP-400-18, use permit UP-110-18, and subdivision SUB 240-18 for 18 months. Can we have a staff report, please?
Thank you, Chair, and good evening again, Commissioners. Planning Director Christian Murdoch. This is another project previously approved by the Planning Commission where the applicant has encountered delays and requests additional time to complete his obligations to prepare the final subdivision map and to obtain a building permit. The applicant has diligently processed, most recently, the building permit application, but the city was unable to issue the building permit on account of the final subdivision map not being recorded, and this extension would help to finalize that. In fact, subsequent to filing the request, the applicant has filed the final subdivision map, and so to a certain extent, this is a formality to close out the administrative record for the project. But nevertheless, again, based on representations from this applicant and his interest in getting this extension granted, my opinion and perception is that there is a legitimate and sincere interest in continuing with the project and to actually construct it.
Thank you, Mr. Murdoch. Are there any questions of the commission? I will open public comment then. Please refer to the screen for call-in instructions and to raise your hand.
Chair, there are no callers.
All right, thank you. Oh, apologies. Is the applicant present?
I do not see the applicant present.
Okay. All right, then I will bring it back to the commission for deliberation or motion. I'm not sure if I said it, but I already closed the public comment period if I didn't already say it. Commissioner Ferguson.
Absent any other comments from the other commissioners, I'm happy to make a motion.
Please.
I move that the Planning Commission extend site development permit PSD 835-18 coastal development permit CDP 400-18 use permit UP 110-18 and subdivision SUB 240-18 by 18 months to establish a new expiration date of February 27th, 2024.
Thank you for the motion. Commissioner Domerat.
I'll second the motion.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote.
That motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Anyone aggrieved by the action the Planning Commission has 10 calendar days to appeal the decision in writing to the City Council. If any of the above actions are challenged in court, issues which may be raised are limited to those raised at the public hearing or in written correspondence delivered to the city at or prior to the public hearing. Judicial review of any city administrative decision may be had only if a petition is filed with the court not later than the 90th day following the date upon which the decision becomes final. Judicial review of environmental determinations may be subject to a shorter time period for litigation. In certain cases, 30 days following the date of final decision. All right, moving on to communications. So we'll start with commission communications. Vice Chair Hauser.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to commend Commissioner Domerat on his new role. I'm not going to let the cat out of the bag, but we're very happy for you. And very well deserved. And then I also wanted to just mention that our water district and our local high school have been working with 2 different universities to do fog collection. And we're actually getting a lot of fog through the fog collectors. So it's something that's really cool, and everyone should check out the article that was written in the Tribune.
Commissioner Domerat.
Well, thank you for that. And also, it was a very good article in the Pacifica Tribune on your project. So I want to see the artwork that then collects fog. That's the next thing. So what Commissioner Hausner was referring to is that I ran for and have been approved to become a harbor commissioner for San Mateo County harbors. And that's for the harbors of Pillar Point Harbor and Oyster Point Harbor. So I've already submitted to Director Murdoch. My resignation date will be the 31st of December. So maybe we'll have another meeting together. Yeah. But we'll certainly talk more at that time. But thank you so much.
Thank you, Commissioner Domerat, and I just want to second what Commissioner Hauser mentioned. It's been a pleasure working with you on the commission, and you are such an asset to the general plan and Sharp Park's specific plan process. So I'm really happy that your name gets to go down in those documents for the next, I don't know, 20 years, 18 years, or 40 years.
Not another 50.
Yeah. So thank you and good luck. All right, moving on to staff communications.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening again. Planning Director Christian Murdoch. I'm excited to announce that the Planning Department has hired 3 new staff recently. One of those staff, Senior Planner Stephanie Cervantes, she's with us tonight, assisting with operation of the dial-in public comment function. A nice dress rehearsal for her tonight with no callers, but I'm sure it'll be busier at future commission meetings. We've also recently hired an associate planner and an assistant planner who you'll meet in due course, either running the dial-in system or presenting items to the Planning Commission. I also want to announce the city has released a draft environmental impact report, or EIR, for the Pacifica School District's workforce housing project at 930 Odstadt Boulevard at the former Odstadt School. It's a 70-unit housing project to redevelop that site with preservation of the ball fields. The document is available on the Planning Department's webpage under Environmental Documents. Copies are also available for public review at the Department counter and at both libraries. And the public comment period is open through January 9th, 2023. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Murdoch. And actually, if it's okay, I'd like to bring it back to the commission for commission communications. There's one item I wanted to ask. Would you be able to give an update on the housing element and where we are? I know there have been a couple community outreach events and some virtual meetings, which were really insightful. But do you mind giving an update on what you're currently working on with your team and what to expect over the next couple of months?
Sure. I don't have a full in-depth presentation that I can pull out of my pocket, but generally speaking, in broad strokes, we had 1 online community meeting and 2 in-person community meetings in the last couple of months. Terrific feedback from our community. Specifically, we were introducing the housing element, providing some background, factual information about what the process is designed to do and required to do under state law, what the city's obligations are, what its requirement is to plan for, as I explained at the meetings, basically over 2,000 housing units over the next 8 years, and how we take that number and shape that into a housing element document, and asking the community for feedback on several of the strategies we've identified to try to plan for that large number of housing units for our community. And so we broke out into small group discussions at those meetings and asked particular focused questions about the strategies and sought opinions about them, as well as other potential strategies the community could think of for planning for housing. We also alluded to the fact that the housing element is more than just planning for housing units. It's also an assessment of the city's policies and programs, other constraints to the production of housing, and what, if anything, the city can do about each of those constraints or limitations. So where we are in the process now is taking that feedback as well as continuing a bunch of technical work across the full range of housing element topics between city staff and our consultant team that we've hired. Our push right now is really aggressively through this holiday period between Thanksgiving and after New Year's, excuse me, to try to prepare a draft document to release to the community in January for public comment and review. I don't want to dodge the elephant in the room, which is the fact that there is a statutory deadline for adoption of the housing element, January 31st of next year for the Bay Area region. We are not going to meet that deadline, unfortunately, for a variety of factors, which I don't want to get into tonight. With that said, we are working as hard as we can to get the document ready for City Council consideration and adoption as soon as possible, ideally within adoption within what's known as the grace period, or 120 days after that statutory deadline, so May 31st. We are working very hard to do that because it preserves some rights for the city to complete rezoning for all of those housing units over a 3-year period rather than a 1-year period if we fail to adopt within the grace period. But other consequences, such as the builder's remedy, which is making the rounds up and down California right now in terms of an issue or controversy, we're well aware of that. We are determining what options or strategies the city may have to minimize the risk to a builder's remedy during that in-between period from the adoption deadline at the end of January and when we actually adopt the housing element as a city. So a lot of work, as I mentioned earlier in the agenda item number 4, about preparing another item for the commission to consider. And we are essentially all hands on deck in terms of pulling our various skill sets in and trying to get that document prepared into a draft form sooner rather than later, which is in the city's best interest.
Thank you, Christian. And so, given that we're fortunate enough to have our general plan and our Sharp Park specific plan adopted currently, will the lots that we changed the land use on and designated more opportunity for housing, will that be incorporated into the housing element, or is there any reason why a certain lot wouldn't be included?
Yeah, so the answer is yes and no, which is a lovely answer to give you. The answer is yes to the extent that the lots also meet other criteria that are relevant to the housing element. And so as I explained in the community meetings, for instance, roughly 60% of our housing obligation, the regional housing needs allocation, or RHNA, that 2,000 unit, scary number, the 60% of those units are low income or lower. So very low, extremely low income. Those are the most challenging to plan for, and thus the state has imposed the highest number of criteria in terms of identifying sites that are appropriate and eligible to be counted towards the production of those lower income housing units. So yes, the Planning Commission made many important and helpful changes in the general plan, but we didn't have the opportunity to put all of the planning needed to accomplish our housing element obligations into the general plan, primarily given the long timeline that was involved in that process that wasn't able to foresee our housing allocation in late 2021. And so we have a lot of additional rezoning work that will be required as part of our housing element update. That general plan as it sits today is not sufficient to comply with our planning obligations. And so much work lies ahead in terms of finding those sites that are appropriate with community input, that reflect other community values like environmental protection, hillside preservation, redeveloping infill commercial properties, for example, and trying to find enough of those sites at the right densities, which will be much higher than densities experienced by this community in the past, to get to that 2,000 unit plus or minus planning figure.
Okay, thank you.
I realize I left out of my response what to expect ahead in the coming months. I alluded to a planned release in January 2023 of a draft housing element for community review and comment for a 30-day comment period. This microphone keeps cutting in and out. A 30-day comment period. Within that comment period, we will plan a city council study session and potentially a joint study session with the Planning Commission and City Council to provide the public an additional opportunity to verbally comment on the draft document in addition to their written comment opportunity. Following that, by law, we have to take at least 10 days to consider those public comments received and then make any revisions we think are necessary based on those public comments, and then send the draft housing element to the California Housing and Community Development Department, or HCD. They have by law up to 90 days to review the document. Reviews in this region have typically been, I think, taking anywhere from 60 to 90. We're hoping to get it on the shorter end so that we can turn around and prepare the document for adoption sooner rather than later, as mentioned. And then that document prior to adoption will come to the Planning Commission first and then to the City Council for formal action.
Thank you. Any other piggyback questions or comments on that? I think you were very thorough in your response. Thank you. Well then, I guess we are ready to adjourn if anyone has a motion to adjourn. Vice Chair Hauser.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? Commissioner Ferguson.
I second the motion to adjourn.
All right, please vote.
That passes unanimously.
All right, good night, everyone. I think I have the ability to kill everyone's right here.
Ooh.
To answer your original question, I think